it's easier when you're able to apply the knowledge to yourself. So pull up your behavioral results either in the software if you've got your report handy, however you want to do it. I find that easier. And remember, if you are in the software, make sure you have your company in the upper right, not the workshop.
Where do you find it in the software, Curtis?
Yeah, good question. So if you are in the software, I'm just going to go to my workshop account. Remember, this should say okay, give me a second. I made it mad. There we go. This should say your company. And you have a couple different options. You can either click on the little magnifying glass in the upper right and search for your name. Or if you have PI Inspire, you can click on Go to Inspire, and your results should be right here on the left. And you can click on View More, and it will take you to what is called Your Person page.
Uh-huh.
Yes, perfect.
Oh, I haven't got a picture like that, though.
You don't?
Oh, hang on. Yeah, scroll up. Okay, go ahead. Thank you.
There we go. Yeah, I don't know why it puts you at the bottom of the page, but so these are your behavioral results. So recommend looking at those as we learn what this stuff means. Mm-hmm. So let's talk about these different factors. A, B, C, and D represent the measurement of our individual drives. So when someone measures high in a particular drive, you will see their circle to the right side of the continuum. If someone is lower for that particular drive, you'll see their circle to the left side of the graph. Higher is not good, lower is not bad. There are no right or wrong answers. It all depends on the context, and it's just simply who you are. When we understand the behavioral drives, we can also understand the motivating needs that are associated with each of those drives. So you'll see there are two columns, one to the left, one to the right. And that is because there are different motivating needs associated with the amount a person has of each drive. For example, someone who measures high in dominance might need to influence or control their own work. Things like independence, they need a challenge, they need opportunities to be able to compete. For those of you who measure high in dominance, so your A drive is on the right side of that graph, do those needs resonate with you?
Yeah, I'd say so.
Yes.
Okay. Our individualists, like to be able to do your own thing, right? Someone who measures low in dominance might need encouragement, reassurance, harmony is really important for them. For those of you who measure lower on dominance, does that resonate with you?
Yeah, it's pretty close for me.
Yeah. People got to get along.
Why can't we all?
Why can't we all get along? Well, there are a lot of answers to that question, but I don't have nearly enough time to get into those. That's a different class, Curtis's worldview. But for today, right now, no need to take notes. There's a resource that tells you all of this stuff, which is really, really helpful with the information already there. We're just thinking through what people may need in the workplace. So let's play a little game. I will show you a set of motivating needs, and you tell me where on the chart they belong. So we will identify each factor, the needs that are associated with those, then whether the needs would indicate whether the person measures high on that drive or low on that drive. If the motivating needs are interaction, social acceptance, and connection with others, what drive do you think that is associated with the ones that you see here?
Extroversion.
Extroversion.
Excellent, yes. All of those are people-related things, right? So is it associated with being high on the extroversion drive or low?
Higher.
Excellent. Yes. So So someone who is driven by their extroversion will need connection. They need to be able to work with people. Chris, as our probably highest extroversion drive as a promoter, does this resonate?
Yeah, it's actually kind of spooky. How it hit it on the head for me.
Yeah,
That's exactly
I hear that
where
a
I'm
lot.
at. Yeah.
Awesome. I hear that a lot when I do these types of things, for sure. People say it's eerily accurate, especially for something that just took 6 minutes, right? Yeah. So if the motivating needs are freedom from controls, flexibility, and the ability to delegate details, what drive would that be associated with?
That be formality.
It is formality. Excellent. Yes, Patricia, that is formality. And if someone needs flexibility and the ability to delegate details, is that associated with being high or low on their formality?
Delegate details. That would have to be high.
Low.
Low. If I like the details, I don't want to delegate them, so I would be lower on my drive to conform to rules and structure and formality if I want to delegate those things. Yes, correct. This game is fun, but this slide does not build in that way. So instead, I'm just going to go through and share each of these things. Oops, there we go. So let's talk about them. We just spoke about extroversion being people-oriented. For those people who are not as driven by their extroversion, they need more time to think. They need room to reflect. They need privacy. They are less driven by their people orientation, so they would prefer privacy and probably to work alone. Let's talk about patience. Patience is the drive for consistency and stability. So someone who is more driven by that need for consistency and stability needs a steady pace. They need that consistency in their work. They also typically like long-term affiliation. My husband, for example, the operator that I mentioned earlier, has been at the same place for almost 15 years, which is, in this day and age, kind of wild. Our millennial generation and younger typically don't stick around at places for that long, but someone who prefers long-term affiliation, they stay around. Now, those of us who are on the other side, who aren't as driven by that consistency and stability, like and need variety. We need change. We need freedom from repetition. That can feel monotonous for people who aren't as driven by their patience. And then finally, for our primary drives, we have that formality piece. So formality is the drive to conform to rules and structure. People who are driven by their formality need knowledge. They need to understand. They need to know. And probably most importantly, they need freedom from risk and error. And errors are risky. So people who are driven by the formality, like me, will research and study and dig and ask questions to understand, to protect themselves from errors and risk. Those of you who aren't as driven by your formality need freedom from that control, from that structure. You need more flexibility and the ability to delegate the details to someone else who's going to be able to do that, because that's not your thing. A, B, C, and D tell us the primary drives of that person. Each of those drives also has what we call intensity. So when you are looking at your chart, there is a midpoint. It's indicated by a 0, there's a line, but basically the midpoint is the mathematical average of the 4 drives, the average expression of your 4 drives. A good way to think about it is like a teeter-totter. It's the balancing point, it's the fulcrum of the teeter-totter. If you have all 4 kids on the same side of the teeter-totter, no one is having fun. There must be balance. So you may have 3 of your drives on the same side of the teeter-totter, but something has to balance you to the other side. The midpoint is used to describe the locations of the points on the pattern. Anything to the right of that midpoint is considered high. Anything to the left is considered low. The more someone has of a particular drive, the further to the right on the graph they will be. So at the bottom, you can see there are 3 different sections on each side. There's a moderate section when you're closer to the midpoint, and then the farther you go in either direction, the more extreme that person is or is not driven by that specific drive. Everyone has some degree of every drive. And remember, there are no right or wrong answers. There are no value judgments. Every placement on this graph represents a set of strengths and a set of caution areas. So as you go further from in either direction, the associated behaviors with those drives become stronger and more forcefully expressed. As you move to the right, you have moderately high, very high, extremely high. As you move to the left, did I say left? I meant right. Right is high, left is low. As you move to the left, you have moderately low, very low, and extremely low. And you can actually see PI breaks this chart into what are called sigmas. That's the standard deviation unit that is used for the assessment. There are 3 sigmas to each side of the midpoint. And these are actually missing negative signs. I'm just gonna draw those in for you. To the right, we have positive. To the left, we have negative. Again, no right or wrong answers. It's just the farther you go, the more extreme. PI also has a really fun little distribution. As people complete the assessment, they get plotted on here, and 68% of people fall between the moderately high and the moderately low. That is referred to as 1 standard deviation or 1 sigma, as I mentioned. If you go 1 sigma further, 95% of all people who complete the assessment have their drives fall between very high and very low. 1 more sigma, 99.7% of people have their drives fall between extremely high and extremely low. So that means if you have a dot on your pattern that falls into that extreme section on either side, only 2.1% of people who have taken this assessment have similarly intense behaviors. Does anybody have an extreme? Either it's extremely high or extremely low? Well, bell curve works then, right? Though, to be fair, 2% of you, so if there are 16, let's see if I can do this. No, I can't. I can't do percentages that quickly, but 2% of 16 is probably around less than 1, so I guess that kind of makes sense. But you'll also notice that this doesn't add up to 100%. It's 99.7%, right? That is because there's a very small percentage of the population that goes beyond the 3rd sigma. So literally off the chart. And in those very rare cases, you will see a little arrow next to the drive that is pointing in the direction, either high or low. A behavioral drive that goes beyond the 3rd sigma is extraordinarily intense, highly observable, and highly predictable. So if you or if your friend, well, none of you all should because no one has anything in the extreme, but if you see someone who has a little arrow next to one of their drives, it means that they are off the charts. Finally, there's one extra denotation to keep in mind, and that is situational factors. Situational factors are either directly on the midpoint, so at the 0, or slightly to the left or right. That is the situational area, and that basically means it's neither high nor low. It could show up as moderately high or moderately low in the workplace depending on the context, depending on the situation. So for example, if someone has situational extroversion, if their B drive is sitting right on that midpoint, it means that in some workplace situations, they may be comfortable with talking problems out with others, but in other situations, they might prefer to think things through on their own. Does anyone have any situational factors right on the midpoint or very close to the midpoint?
I do.
Christina does, Vicky does, Lindsay does, Zawaya does.
Curtis, I'm straight down the middle.
Every
oh my gosh.
factor.
I'm looking at him, I'm having a moment. I'm straight like,
Yep.
I don't even know what's going on.
That's the adapter. So an adapter is kind of a special reference profile of the 17 because every drive is situational. It all depends. It all depends for an adapter. Every situation is going to be a little bit different. Oh, here's an example of what off the chart looks like. So if you see, and let me just get rid of those minus marks, there we go. If you see someone that has that little arrow next to one of their drives, in this case is next to a very high dominance drive, that means that person is off the charts. And you are going to know it. You are going to experience that for sure. Here is an example of what it looks like when you have something on or very close to the midpoint. So in this case, we have someone who has their extroversion, like I was just talking about, right there on the midpoint. Technically, I'm going to draw on here. I'm going to attempt to draw straight lines, but it's really difficult with the mouse. 2/5 of a sigma. There we go. Straight lines, right? 2/5 of a sigma on either side. So 2 of these little ticks down here, down at the bottom. That is the situational area. So if you have a drive that falls between +2 or -2/5, that is situational. So it all depends. That was a lot. I'm going to pause there for just a second. Shouldn't that be a red flag? Uh-oh. So why do you want to talk about that? No, I'll talk about that. Sherry, no. I would not call that a red flag. It's just how that person is behaviorally driven. There are no right or wrong answers. Sometimes you need people who are going to be really flexible and adaptable in a situation. There may be roles that require you to be totally situational in your approach because that's just what is needed for that role, right?
I was thinking about that with like dominance, right? Like, so if someone was a dominance with an arrow pointing that way, to me that would be kind of a red flag, but that's my industry and kind of the situation I work in.
That's what Sherry was talking about too.
Yeah.
Good. Sorry, I didn't see that until I was done. Yes, so let's talk about that. Is that a red flag? I'm gonna say no, but I will say it depends. Any drive. Go ahead, Patricia.
No, finish what you're saying, sorry. I'll wait.
Any drive can be a red flag. If you don't know, and this is what I talk about them like they're superpowers. Congratulations, you're a superhero. You didn't know it. Everybody is. The way that your drives show up cause you to behave in a certain way. Those are your superpowers. If you do not know how to use your superpowers, they can be very dangerous and destructive. So, if we look at someone with this type of drive, who is off the charts dominant, and we're going to learn in just a second what that means, but I mean, you hear the word dominant and you probably know what that means, right? If this person does not know or care how to use those superpowers, then yes, I would say that's a red flag. I've worked with someone like that before. I'll use my 2 ex-husbands to say that statistically dominance off the charts is a bigger red flag. Yeah, if you don't know how to use it, then it can be very, very bad. So let's actually talk about that. Let's dig in. Patricia, did you have something specific that you wanted to say?
I actually wanted to say, when I was taking the survey, I didn't agree with some of the statements that I had to take.
Tell me more.
I can't remember which ones they were. But I kind of had to say, well, is it this or is it this? And I had to choose. So, I always said, can I take another survey to see if it comes out the same? But they say they don't recommend doing it.
That is correct. So, I don't know if I say this later or I could just say it right now. So the science behind PI says that the results are good for 8 years plus.
Oh, okay.
Some people take the assessment once and they're good forever. Like that's me. And that is because the prefrontal cortex, which is, it helps to, that's basically our personality center. That is where these drives live. And once that prefrontal cortex solidifies, firms up at around the age of 21-ish, those drives really don't change all that much.
Okay.
Now, people do experience trauma. They experience various things that could cause those drives to change. So I don't say that they can't, because they can, but they don't typically. And that is why PI says, typically when you take this assessment, if you take it after that is all kind of set and your personality is firm, then it's not going to change all that much.
Okay.
Test, retest reliability is what it's called, is also very high for the PI assessment. So if you were to take it again, your behavioral drives very likely would not have shifted all that much.
Okay.
So if you wanted to take it again, you certainly could. It's not recommended. But the other thing is, as you learn about what this all means, you kind of spoil the well a little bit, poison the well, because even if you're not intending to, you can introduce some bias, because now you know, right? You know the special sauce, you know how to kind of engineer what it is that you want. So it's up to you. Couldn't hurt, but PI will only run reports on the original completion.
Okay.
So if you want to take it a second time, you might want to use a different email address or something along those lines, just to be able to see the outcome there.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
Okay, so let's talk about dominance, and we can dig in a little bit further into why this might be a little bit of a red flag. In your workshop companion, this is where you're going to be able to see behaviors that are associated with each of the different drives. This is, I think, one of the most helpful tools. So workshop companion, pages 6 and 7, and it spans across the two. If you're looking at it on your computer through a PDF, it's a little bit more challenging to see. You'll have to flip back and forth. If you've got the hard copy right in front of you, open it up, and we're going to go through each of these pieces. So now that we have a better understanding of dominance as the drive to exert influence on people or events, let's see how that actually shows up at work. For someone who is driven by their dominance, so they are on the higher side, their A is to the right of the midpoint. If they are in the moderate section, so between 0 and 1 on the higher side, they would be likely to be moderately assertive. So you might use words like independent, determined, autonomous. They're going to do their work on their own. Let's see. Yeah, okay. So there's nowhere for you to be writing these things.
Can I ask you a question, Curtis? Sorry.
Yes.
How about where I'm in Barbados, the culture here is fairly passive aggressive. So, you know, when I came from the UK, it was always, oh, Pat's there humbugging you, they've got different words. Pat's there harassing you to get the work done fast, blah, blah, blah. I didn't see myself as being assertive, I just wanted to get the task done. by whatever timeline. Does that have an influence in terms of how people would rate themselves? Because most people here would present as introverted, but because of their jobs, they would be extroverted. You know, I'm a CHRO or whatever I am, that type of thing. Does that? Can you actually see that in the assessment as well?
So also a good question, and hopping ahead a little bit, but let me give you a preview. So when you complete the assessment, there are two questions. If you can remember back to when you completed the behavioral assessment, the first question is, how do you feel you were expected to be? And then the second question is, who are you really? The answers to each of those questions give you two different patterns. And the one that we're focusing on right now, and the one that you're looking at in your software, is called the self pattern. And it's the answer to that second question, which is, who are you really? These are your innate behavioral drives that if, when you took the assessment, you really thought, okay, well, who am I? Regardless of where I am, what job I have, how do I behave? Like, how am I? Who am I? Then that is what is creating the reference profile that you have. And that is the one that doesn't change really at all, 8+ years, right? The second, or the answers to the first question, how you feel you were expected to be, create what is called the self-concept. And I think that if someone is more of an innately reserved person, but they're in a role where they are expected to be very people-oriented, that is where you would see a difference between the self and the self-concept. We're going to talk about that a little bit later today, I believe. But right now, we're really talking about the self, your innate behaviors. And honestly, we're actually just talking about the drives in general. And whether they're self or self-concept, this is how the drives show up. Andrea.
Sorry, yeah, so this might be a question for later, so feel free to please kind of kick it down the road if needed. But one question I had was, when you first provide the assessment to people, what context should we ask them to use when answering it? Is it them totally free of any social pressures, sitting on a beach, completing it for who they are, or is it them in the workplace?
I think we'll talk about it a little bit later, but I'll answer it now just so that we've got an answer out there. It's them. It is not necessarily, well, depending on which question they're answering. So the first question is, how do you feel you were expected to be? And it's pretty much in the workplace, right? Now that very well, maybe if they are applying to your organization, that's not there. It's at their current job, right? Who are you expected to be right now? If you're providing this to your current employees, then yes, it's in their role right now. Who are you expected to be? But the second one, who are you really, should not be impacted or influenced at all by the role that they're in, or really it's who are you? How do you identify? And that will give you the purest result. Cool. Okay. Let's come back to dominance. So that first drive, the drive to exert influence on people or events, I like to call it the fingerprint or thumbprint drive, because people who are driven by their dominance are more assertive. They need that independence to challenge the opportunities to compete. We talked about if someone is moderately high, how they're going to behave. But let's go one step further. If their drive falls between 1 and 2 on the positive side, then they would be considered very high. They would be very assertive. And you might use words like competitive, maybe even venturesome or directing. They like to have their way. They have an idea and they're going to run with it. Finally, if you go one step further, out to the extreme area, so between 2 and 3, extremely assertive, resolute, dauntless, challenging. Even further beyond that, that person with the little arrow, they're going to be even more so. Resolute, dauntless, challenging, all of these words, they're going to like their way. So let's talk. Think about this behavior, specifically a high dominance person. Think about this behavior in a meeting situation. What strengths could someone with a high dominance drive bring to a meeting?
They'll get things done.
Directing,
almost through-
focused. Sorry.
Yeah. No, sorry, Patricia. I was just gonna say, like, they'll make sure that people are moving forward.
Take charge. Move things forward. Absolutely. Steer the ship. What are some of the cautions that someone might bring to a meeting if they have a high dominance drive? Oh, Sherry says others may not feel okay to share. Great one, yeah. What else?
They could take over the meeting on their own agenda, hijack the whole thing.
Hijack the meeting with their agenda, dominate. Victoria says they may not be as collaborative. Crystal says they might talk over others. Absolutely. So remember, these are superpowers, and if you don't know how to use your superpowers, they can be destructive. I always like to talk about the X-Men. I was a big fan of the X-Men growing up. Are we familiar with the X-Men? Yes, some people are. There is one of the superheroes of the X-Men called Cyclops, and Cyclops has laser vision. But when Cyclops was a kid and he got his laser vision, he didn't know how to use it. He didn't know how to control it. And I think he actually ended up killing his mother. Someone told me that. But at the very least, he was extremely destructive because he didn't know how to use laser vision. Is laser vision a superpower? Yeah, I would say so. But if you don't know how to use it, you can hurt people. That is the same with every single one of these things that we're talking about. Someone who is off the charts high could be a steamroller. They can be really difficult to work with. So knowing that about yourself, knowing who you are and those potential caution areas that might crop up if you let them run wild is the most important takeaway. Let's talk about the other side. People who aren't as driven by their dominance are going to be more agreeable. So someone who is moderately low with their dominance would be moderately agreeable. So they're maybe unselfish, receptive, supportive. The farther we go, the more extreme. Very agreeable. Cooperative, accepting, collaborative. All the way out on the end, extremely agreeable. Deferential. Let's do it your way. Compliant, accommodating. What are the strengths that you think someone with a low dominance drive would bring to a meeting? Let's raise our hands just to make it a little bit easier. Or feel free to put it in the chat, that's also okay. Thoughtfulness, collaboration, great. A sense of team, interesting. Encouraging of multiple ideas, open to new ideas, engagement, making sure everyone is heard, inclusiveness. Absolutely. Yeah. They are the ones that are asking around the table, what do you think? Now, on the other side, they could check out if not included. Interesting. They could be more passive, too passive. People who aren't as driven by their dominance tend to avoid conflict, especially when they're extremely low with their dominance. They may be so deferential that they're like, they don't have an opinion, right? Just as these are superpowers on the right, they are superpowers on the left too. Being that agreeable, cooperative, collaborative person is fantastic. Being a pushover, maybe not so fantastic, right? All of that is to say, both sides are great. Can you not have some of these traits even on the assertive side? Absolutely. Absolutely. It is more challenging to show some of these behaviors the farther you go away from the midpoint. So remember, the closer you are to the midpoint, the more situational. So you're probably going to have some of these things showing up depending on the situation. The farther you go in either direction, the more difficult it is for you to stretch. Now, we all stretch every day, right? We all show up to work. We're put into situations where we are expected to be slightly different or maybe even greatly different than we are inherently driven to be. And that can be really challenging, especially when we are very or extremely driven or not driven by a certain drive. So think about dominance, where you show up. If you are on the higher side for your dominance and you're put into a situation where you can't be the person who is leading, you cannot be the independent, determined person that you like to be, and you have to be more of a cooperative and accepting person, what does that do? How does that feel?
Does
Flip
it
it
come
around.
with age? Does it come with age, Curtis? I was gonna say that. How can I say it? Being able to kind of juggle in that sense. When I was younger, I would have been more, more assertive, very assertive, directing. But I think now, I try to balance, and I know that I don't necessarily listen to people very well because of how I think. But I try to be more agreeable and more receptive and more supportive, even though my patience is very low, which I know, so I try to balance that.
I would say it doesn't come with age, it comes with experience.
Yeah.
And experience tends to come with age, but they're, not mutually exclusive.
Yeah.
You've had, when you are later in your career, you've had more opportunities to have some of those experiences where you showed up as a, more assertive, competitive, determined person, and maybe it didn't go over so well. And that taught you the need for being able to flex to that other side and being more cooperative and collaborative.
Yeah.
And at this point, you figured it out, right? You've built
because you have to get
skills.
buy-in. You can't get buy-in if you overtake all the time. You're just not going. And particularly I realised with this culture, with this, because people talk, they don't talk. It's very hard to read them sometimes in a meeting, and then you literally see people outside by the water cooler or outside the door talking about everything that went wrong. So from that I was like, and that frustrates me because if I say I can do, I can do. If I can't do, I can't do. But people don't ask questions, don't say, but they're really upset, and then it's really hard to gauge how to pitch. So you kind of have to do that here.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
Okay, so don't want to digress too much. But yes, thank you.
You are seeing behavior in live time. You are seeing that people are probably more reserved in their behavior. They're not asking questions. They're not raising their hand. They're not sharing that information. And you are going to have to approach them in a different way. You're going to probably have to call on them and ask them or give them time to think things through, provide them some information beforehand so that they have the ability to prepare to provide that information and answer those questions when you need them. Yeah. Lindsay.
It's
go ahead.
This is very, how can I say it? It's very, I know what's primary school, secondary school, I know your mother, your father, your auntie, your grandmother. Do you understand me? And obviously I've not got that kind of connection here. So you tend to find that people will come into an office. Yes, some people will come to you, but the questions they ask me and the questions they ask somebody else are going to literally be, I know her, I like her, I'm going to tell her everything. Pat have to kind of read through the lines and all the rest of it. And it's still, and I've been here 20 years and I still get it. And sometimes I still find it very hard. But it is what it is. That's just how it is. So I recognise that now, and it doesn't upset me as much as it did before, because that's just how it is. I have to accept it.
Yeah, that sounds a little bit closer to cultural issues.
Yes.
And not even necessarily Barbados, but just like within the organization, within your office, there's cultural norms. This is how we do things. This is how we talk. This is who we talk to, and those can be influenced by behavior. but not necessarily, they're not exactly the same, but they can be influenced for sure. But it sounds like it's taken some time, but now you understand it a little bit better and you're learning how to ride that wave, how to go with the flow of the organization.
I must say though, because I've done, sorry, I don't want to talk too much, but I've done Savile, I've done human synergistics. So when I did this one, I was like, oh my God, and people are like, Pat, you brought software on? I'm like, yeah. What, without talking to anybody? I'm like, yeah. So like, yeah, this is actually the best model that I've seen so far in 20 years, literally.
Awesome.
Anyway, enough of me talking.
I'm glad to hear that. Lindsay.
I was just going to share too, I think in my much earlier career, well, where I sit now is higher on the dominant side, but where much earlier in my career, I was much more agreeable, didn't feel comfortable in sharing. And then I think I went to the other extreme. And then now where I am, I feel as though I've seen the benefits of both and learned to read the situation more and the people more. And that's helped me to kind of balance out. The profile that I have does say for self is a little more midline, and then self-concept is a little higher on the dominance.
Interesting. Okay. And we will learn exactly what that means once we get to self-concept. But for now, I would love for you all to take a moment, now that we have a better understanding of dominance, find where your A factor, your dominance factor falls. And I want you to write a sentence to describe how you will behave. So that is in your workbook, I believe. Yes. For me, it's page 26. I think it might be 22 for some of you, but it says my PI results. So fill in the dominance section. Where is your A factor? What are some things that you might need? And what are some behaviors that you will exhibit? And you can find all of those things between pages 6 and 7 of your workshop companion. So let's take like 2 minutes, fill that out for me.
Curtis, are we referencing the self or the self-concept?
Self. We are looking at self, yes. Because our self pattern is the truest you.
It's this page, right? 20, I have it as 23.
Yep, that's the correct one.
All right, thank you.
It says my PI results using page 6 of the workshop companion. Complete the sentence templates below. And for some of you, if you have a drive that is situational, pull from both sides. Because it all depends, right? Pull the needs and the behaviors that resonate with you most. I would love to have someone volunteer, raise your hand, and read out your sentences. I see some of you all are still working, so I'll give you a minute or two more, but just be prepared. When you're done, look done.
You like venison?
was that, Sherry? Oh, hi, Sherry. Okay. Can I have a volunteer to read your sentences? Sherry.
I don't know.
Oh, sorry, Andrea. Maybe next time.
No.
Sherry, go ahead.
I don't know if they're sentences, but my A factor is situationally collaborative. But I'm one of those people that started off the chart D and over time and self awareness have moved back down to situationally. So I thought that was really interesting. So I may need, my needs were wrong because I'm not normally on the low side. My needs actually are opportunities to collaborate, which is low, but understanding the big picture and control of my activities, which is on the high side. And then I may exhibit unselfish, receptive, and supportive behaviors.
Okay, so those behaviors are mostly on the lower side.
The behaviors, yes. The needs are high.
But the needs a little bit mixed. Okay, yeah. So that's kind of what situational does, right? It all depends. Andrea, why don't you go ahead too?
Sure. So I score, so my A factor is moderately low. I may need opportunities to collaborate, reassurance, and understanding the big picture. And I may exhibit receptiveness to others' ideas, but I also may appear undecided while I process different perspectives.
Awesome. Fantastic. How are we feeling? Do we understand dominance? I will take your silence and slight nods as a yes. Let's move on to extroversion. Extroversion is the drive for social interaction with others. So again, this is the people drive. People who are driven by their extroversion tend to be more outgoing. They need that connection with other people. They need interaction. So people who are moderately high for their extroversion are typically going to be moderately outgoing, sociable, talkative, open. The farther we go to the very high, they're going to be personable, enthusiastic, animated in their approach. People who are extremely high, expressive, gregarious, convincing. Now, these are all just descriptors, but the important takeaway here is the higher you go, the more frequently and common you're going to experience the behaviors of this person. So when someone is extremely high with their extroversion, you're going to see those expressive, convincing, animated, personable behaviors much more frequently. And the closer we get to that midpoint, the easier it is for that person to flip back and forth. So let's put this back into the meeting scenario, meeting situation. Someone raise their hand and tell me, what strengths could a high extroversion person bring to a meeting? Alternately, pop it in the chat. Also, I love seeing people interact with each other and talk, answer questions. I do my best, but great icebreakers, good listeners, keeping the conversation going. Absolutely. They're engaging. They are people. People who are driven by their extroversion need to process things out loud. They are typically going to be talkers. Energetic even. Yeah. So what about on the other side? What are some cautions that a high extroversion person brings to a meeting? Overbearing. Yes, absolutely. Who was that? Sorry.
Hard to keep them on task and
Hard to
focused
keep
in
them
the
on
meeting.
task. Chris, are you talking about yourself?
A little bit, maybe.
I keep picking on Chris because a promoter's highest drive is their extroversion. So this is the one that you're probably going to feel most, for sure. They may dominate the conversation because they're talking so much. I don't know if I agree with the last two. Difficult to come to a conclusion and quick to make decisions. So, not necessarily. Quick to make decisions could be from being extroverted and talking things out, but I would say that that is also influenced by one of our other drives. This drive is specifically about social interaction with other people. The difficulty in coming to a conclusion, I could also see that. Maybe it's constantly talking, but I think that one would also probably be influenced by a couple of our other drives. But yes, dominating the conversation, talking so much that other people can't get a word in edgewise, overly engaging. They may only want to discuss their opinions or ideas. I would say that also is going to be influenced by the dominance drive. They may like to talk, but if they also have a very high dominance drive, it's all about the way that their opinions, their ideas. Yeah. For those of you who are higher on the extroversion, do those strengths and caution areas resonate with you? I actually don't think we have too many people who are driven by their extroversion on this call, based on what reference profiles we have. A couple people for sure. Yeah. Okay, let's talk about on the lower side. So someone who isn't as driven by their extroversion is going to typically be more reserved. People who aren't as driven by their extroversion need time. They need time to think, to process, and room for reflection before they share their opinion, if they share it at all. So someone who is moderately low when it comes to their extroversion is going to be moderately reserved, thoughtful, reflective, and collected. One step further, we get into quiet, introspection. They may even be pensive. Someone who is extremely low on their extroversion may come across as frank. They are so focused on facts, details, and not focused on people that when they communicate, it is in a very direct, frank, guarded, and maybe even private way. Patricia, did you have a question?
Is that a narcissistic personality then when it's extremely low?
I wouldn't say that necessarily. It's simply, how is this person behaviorally driven? They aren't driven by interaction with others, but I don't think that that necessarily makes them a narcissist. I think you could have a narcissist who is very driven by people and, optics. They have to look good.
Gotcha.
People who aren't as driven by their extroversion are less focused on the optics of a situation. What a good point, Andrea. So if you disagree with your assessment on a certain point, that is a good conversation to have. So you disagree with your extroversion drive. Tell me more.
So I score very low, like just on the edge of very low. And I strongly think that I'm moderately low. Like I agree with the introversion, but I flex so often into extroversion. That I am pensive, I need time, but I'm not as reserved as others. And I think I'm forced not to be, but I've grown very comfortable with it.
So that is the difference between the self and the self-concept. The self is who you are, your true innate, how you are behaviorally driven. Your self-concept is how you feel you were expected to be and kind of how you have to stretch into your current role. So if you look at yourself versus your self-concept, it sounds like yourself is moderately to very low on the extroversion, but I would guess that your self-concept is probably on the higher side because you're having to stretch in this role where you are having to be more extroverted and people-oriented. Is that correct?
That's correct, and I have for years. So I feel like you stay solid for 8 years. Like I feel like it's pulled me. it's changed my overall behavior.
I see. So because you've had to stretch so frequently over the past several years, you feel like your innate drive has shifted further to the right. Interesting. But you did agree that you are more of a reserved, reflective person inherently. So it sounds correct to me.
Like I'd shift it one sigma over. Is what I would
okay.
like. It's pretty detailed. So again, I don't need to take up a ton of time in the group setting, but
yeah,
I just think it would be more accurate if it were elsewhere.
Interesting. Okay. Remember that also, these are, well, I guess I didn't say this part, but this assessment is what's called ipsative. There is no norm that you are being compared against. Your behavioral drives fall onto this graph in relation to each other. So in relation to your other drives, your extroversion drive is very low, and it's almost like if you remember that there has to be balance across the midpoint, that extroversion may be pulled down even further to balance something that's on the higher side.
Okay.
Yeah, so something to think about and definitely have a conversation about. Let's do, in our books, whatever page that was, go ahead and fill in your statements for extroversion. So where is your B factor? What are some things that you might need? And what are some behaviors that you might exhibit? Let's take 3 minutes, 2 minutes. We'll do a share out and then we'll take a break.
Are we taking a break now or after we come back with a question?
After.
With the answer?
After, yeah. We're going to fill in your statements. We'll do a quick share out with a person or two, and then we'll take a break.
Okay, cool.
All right, let's have someone on the higher side of their extroversion volunteer, and then we'll have a lower person. And that way we get a nice mix. Chris, thank you.
I'm giving thumbs up to my own hands up. So I got very high on the extroversion, and I think that's about right. I'm pretty outgoing and personable. I'm a weak interaction, recognition, and acceptance. These are all true. Tell me I'm doing a good job. Tell me what I need to do better. And I may exhibit, my animated enthusiasm when I'm talking or trying to convince somebody what I want to do.
Awesome. Thank you. How about someone on the lower side of the extroversion? So Aya, yes.
I am not on the lower side. I am situational. So
Okay.
my V factor, I'm in the mid, but I need freedom from office politics. I need time to reflect. I need privacy. Yeah.
Okay.
And so I exhibit moments of being quiet, being frank if I'm pushed up against a wall, and being very guarded.
Interesting. Okay. So you are situational, but probably tending to err in that direction. Awesome. Fantastic. Thanks for sharing. All right, let's take another break. Let's do 10. We'll come back at 20 after, and we will continue with the C factor.